Logic 0, example 4.2. Full evaluation of an interpretation with a trailing parenthesis. Okay. So this is a subtle detail that you need to get right, because the Google Forms are only going to take your answer if it's exactly right. And so there's a little thing here that might throw you off at first. Just make sure you get this. And this is, all of this symbolic apparatus that we're developing is not conventional across, logic courses. I've developed this as my own symbolic system. So some of this stuff is just arbitrary. Just get with the program the way that I'm doing it. And that's sort of the way it is across logic courses. Different logic textbooks and different logic professors, they use different symbolic systems. The specific symbols that we use are not important. The importance is the way that the symbols are arranged. And despite what symbols we may use, there is a uniformity across different symbolic systems in the actual structure of the way that the symbols are arranged. That's what is conventional and widespread across different logic courses. But the specific symbols, whether you use uppercase letters or lowercase letters, whether you use certain symbols for the operations, these can all be different. But once you get familiar with a few different symbolic systems, no matter what system you're looking at, you're like, oh, I see what's going on here. Because the structure and the way that things are arranged is essentially the same across systems of symbols. But one little quirk of my convention of doing things is that we're not going to put an underscore for a closing parenthesis that is at the end of a line. So we're going to truncate things here a bit. So when we fill this out, I'm going to copy over the value of A, working left to right, and I'm going to skip multiplication because we don't have the right hand evaluated yet. Whoops. I'm going to put an underscore for the opening parenthesis. And then for B, we have odd. We're going to skip addition, and C is even, lowercase o. For B, it's odd, lowercase I. And now we can evaluate the addition. We have odd even. So we're going to go to the odd even row of the lookup table. And we're going to go over to addition, and it says it is odd. Okay. All right, so odd for this addition, which is the entire right-hand input of multiplication. So we have A is odd, and the right hand is odd. So we go to the lookup table, and we look at the odd row, and we go over to multiplication, and it says that it is odd. All right, and this is the last thing that we've come to. So multiplication is the dominant operation here, and we're going to make that an actual number 1 for odd. For the entire expression comes out to be odd. Okay. Now, I'm not going to put an underscore here. We're going to truncate that because that underscore doesn't really add any information. The semicolon says it's the end of the line. Okay. And the only reason that we put an underscore here is that this underscore spaces things out. It pushes things to the right so that this odd is right under the B. And notice that this is all made possible by the use of a monospaced font. Make sure that you are using a monospaced font. Because if you're not using a monospaced font, this table method is not going to work very well, because things are not going to line up nicely. And then you're like, if you find yourself counting hyphens, you are doing something wrong. What are you doing wrong? If you are counting hyphens, what are you doing wrong? You are not using a monospaced font. As discussed in the previous demonstration, Arial is not a monospaced font. We want it in a monospaced font so that you don't have to count hyphens, because the first hyphen lines up with the first character of the expression, and the last hyphen lines up with the last character of the expression. Okay. But we're not particularly concerned with making sure that everything comes out nice and square. That's not what we're doing. We're going to eliminate those trailing underscores because it just carries no information. Okay. And then we want an answer string ultimately to enter into the Google form. So we're going to eliminate the line breaks. And this is the answer string that we will enter into the Google form. Notice that it has absolutely no spaces. This underscore is to make sure, or is to eliminate any spaces, because one space versus two spaces, that may not be visually apparent. But by using underscores, everything is very apparent, and we get a text code here. So this is like I mentioned before, it's like a password. It has to be right, character by character, and it uses no spaces, just like in most passwords that you fill out on online platforms. Usually they require you to have no spaces in your password. Same thing here, no spaces. So if we need a space, like for an open parenthesis, we're going to put an underscore to make sure that when we do turn it back into a table, everything lines up. Notice that we can take this answer string and just put the line breaks back in. And it comes out, when we're using a monospaced font, as a table, where each of the elements lines up vertically with what it corresponds to. Okay, so again, when you enter your answers, make sure you're entering them as an answer string with absolutely no spaces and following all the conventions that I've gone over in this chapter.